During the Viking period, around 10% of the population were estimated to have been slaves, or thralls as they were called then. Now, these were often kidnapped or forced into slavery, but also an indebted man could find himself a slave later on, and sometimes, well, there are reports of people losing drinking games and gambling away their freedom. Now, they would have carried out the more menial tasks like farming, but not a great deal is written about them. However, archaeological findings show that they had a pretty bad life, and many thralls were in fact buried alongside their masters. The way you can tell they were a slave, by and large, is that they were buried with nothing with them. And the archaeologists have found that they had many wounds, showing that they were beaten throughout their life. Some had their heads cut off, and all of this backs up Ibn Fadlan's account of Viking slave sacrifice. Ibn Fadlan, by the way, was writing about Nordic people in Russia, but he said that he saw a slave girl being held by 6 men, and then a dagger opened up her ribs and a noose was tightened around her neck. So slave sacrifice seems to have been a thing. And he also said that all 6 men had sex with the slave girl beforehand, so sexual violence was also rampant. However, like with any conversation on slavery in the past, all this is up for debate. But I'd like to end off on 2 points. We'll end off the little slavery section on 2 points that I found particularly interesting. First of all, most thralls they have found came from the local area. I thought that was quite strange, and well, if you consider how far the Vikings used to travel and raid. And secondly, although some thralls were able to buy their freedom, they still had to remain loyal as a free man to their old masters. But on Viking society, I would like to talk briefly about the Ledang. Now, this was a sort of early conscription for coastal defences and raids. Now, in a future video, I'm going to talk about the allotment system in Sweden, which allowed the early modern Swedish to create a huge army, and this is something very similar. To sort of summarize it briefly, each nation was divided up into districts, and by the 13th century it had become a lot more developed, and there were a couple hundred districts in Denmark, and here in Norway there were about a half or a third of what there were in Denmark. But each district had to provide at least a ship, a crew, and supplies for a 2-month voyage. Larger districts, those with more farms, were expected to provide more, but to manage these demands, each district was split in half. Half of the district would provide the crew, and the other half would build the ships. And thralls and peasants would help equip an oarsman, and even those living far inland would have to provide the timber. This is the system that allowed the Vikings to send out so many ships filled with men so quickly and raid all over the world. And this is also why the successor kingdoms like Denmark and Norway became so formidable in the early modern period. Plus, the English also copied the system to create a land army. Under Alfred the Great, they had the Fyrd, spelled F-Y-R-D, but I don't know how to pronounce it.